It's very easy to look at the tactical and the tangible things like numbers inside of a launch. But there are a lot of invisible lessons that you can learn inside of every single launch. And inside this episode, I'm going to break down 8 of them that I learned in our biggest launch we've ever done. So keep listening. Hi, I'm Brandon Lucero, and you're about to experience the new way to thrive in business, entrepreneurship, and life by leaning into who you are, what you love, and standing up for what you want to create. Get ready, because this is where we go against the grain, say no to outdated society norms, and we say yes to change in order to create a happier, more fulfilled world. Welcome to the New Generation Entrepreneur Podcast. Hello. Welcome back to another episode. Today is part 2 of our debrief, and today's all about the lessons that I learned from this launch. Now, if you remember from last week's episode, we talked about the nitty-gritty, like the strategy, things that we did from a strategy, lessons from a strategy standpoint, what worked, what didn't work, things that we didn't expect, stuff like that. Now, part of the reason why I share these numbers, and before we recorded this podcast episode, I was kind of talking to Matt, I'm like, man, since as we do bigger and bigger launches, I don't know if we should be sharing numbers and stuff like that. And Matt's like, no, we definitely want to be transparent and teach through experience. And he had a lot of good points, but I just want to make sure that you guys understand the reason for us sharing these lessons and the reasons why we share the numbers is to help you guys improve your launches, to learn through our knowing, through our experience. And that is from a strategy standpoint, and also from this next part, which is going to be more of mindset or leadership type of things as well. What I call this is the masculine and the feminine energies. So the masculine energy is very much like strategy and numbers and tactical, and feminine energy is much more of the mindset, the being type of stuff. I guess you would call it the invisible elements, right? So last week's episode was very much the masculine energy of the strategy, the numbers, and the stuff that's very visible, very tactical. But this is the feminine energy, which is very invisible. And this is the type of stuff that, when we're going to go over in this episode, that a lot of people just don't focus on. Or they hear it and they're like, yes, that is great. That is a quotable, great quote, Brandon. Maybe I'm going to quote that and put it up on Instagram, but they're not living it. And the reason why I'm sharing these lessons with you today is so that you can live it. That's the whole reason why we're doing it. And sometimes sharing numbers and stuff like that, it does make me a little uncomfortable, because I'm like, man, these are just big numbers, and I don't know. But I'm doing it for you. I'm doing it so that you can learn, so that you can see our growth and our progression. You can see our mistakes. You can see that I do things even if they're not perfect. I make mistakes and we succeed even with those mistakes being done, so that you guys can do the same thing. And what I want to share with you today are 8 lessons that I learned. Some of them are going to be a little tactical. 1 or 2 of them might be, but most of them are going to be kind of these invisible things that most people really don't focus on that much. So let's start with lesson number 1. I have 8 of them. Lesson number 1 is having a great runway. And we talked a little bit about this on the last episode. And I talked about how we started in basically December, and then we launched everything in January. And we went from quiz on messaging sophistication, which got people to realize they're not at the top, and they have a ways to go to having their messaging fully dialed in. Then we went to the 2-day live workshop, and then to our video series. So we had built momentum for 2 months before the release of the video series. Building up audience, revealing pain points, revealing mistakes and thought reversal, things they thought were normal, a lot of that type of stuff. And if you guys have noticed, a lot of our runway was actually very thought reversal-y. And what I mean by thought reversal-y is that one of the things we teach inside the Video Forex program is find those industry norms that are outdated and are actually causing suffering. Use those as the theme inside your messaging, inside your ads, inside of your sales mechanism. In fact, some of our best converting ads literally were just a thought reversal script in the ad copy about how-to content is how or the reason why you're growing really slow. And we actually had people joining our launch in our Facebook group saying the ad copy spoke to them. And that's never happened before. And I believe it's because of this thought reversal thing that's going on, and it's really relevant. And that's the first thing of the Great Runway, is like to get your messaging dialed in, make it very thought reversally. So even our 2-day workshop, it wasn't like, hey, dial in your messaging in this 2-day workshop. It was very much like, learn how to stand out without surveying your audience, without having to build or be vulnerable all the time, and without endless amounts of how-to content. And as you guys likely know, those are 3 things that I say kill messaging and kill content. Is 1, thinking that vulnerability builds connection, because it's what vulnerability releases that actually builds a connection. I tell people not to survey their audience, because then your audience controls your message. So create your message first, then survey, and only do the things that they say that they want that are within your messaging ecosystem. And then I say how-to content isn't how to stand out, because you blend in with all the other experts that are teaching all the same how-to content. So a lot of our messaging in our runway was all around these thought reversal themes that we knew were working. So that's number 1. That's how we started to craft a really great runway. Well, we started to look at what worked well last year versus this year. And our content that influences training was our middle runway. It was like the training that we were trying to get people to opt in for, and then we can move them into the video series. But it was a pre-recorded 30-minute training, and it did fine. It converted fine from a earning or cost per lead standpoint. Some of the people that went through it ended up buying, and it was fine. It was great. Like, it was nothing special. It's nothing to write home about. So we decided to change that up. And I'm a big believer in only changing a few things from launch to launch to launch, because you never know what's really going to work or what is working when you change 10 things. And then all of a sudden you have a huge spike in your launch. You're like, great. Was it 5 of those 10 things? Was it 1 of those 10 things? Was it all of them? It's hard to tell. So one of the things that we really wanted to change, there's 2 major things that we changed in this launch, which you guys already know, is number 1, the video series. Number 2, I would say it was our runway content. And I remember Laura Phillips, who is a mentorship student, and I remember working with her on her messaging, and what she teaches is launching from experience. And one of her beliefs is that the way launching has been done for a long time is kind of becoming less and less effective, and it will require more of an experience. And I'm with her on that. I believe that to my core. And so what we wanted to do is we decided to make our runway content an event within itself and give a better experience. We really wanted people to be just waiting for this event. So we decided to make it a 2-day workshop. And I've seen Jill and Josh Stanton from Screw the 9 to 5 absolutely kill it with workshops. And they usually do like a $47 price tag on it. But since this wasn't our main sales mechanism, I wanted as many people as we could get into this workshop, because that meant more of that would give us more amount of people that will go over to the video series, which is our main sales mechanism. So since this wasn't our main sales mechanism, I decided to make it free, but we're going to treat it as if it was a paid workshop. And it absolutely killed it. We had about 750, 800 people show up live with us. And I remember inside of that training, asking people questions, and comments would come in so fast I couldn't even read them. But what it allowed me to do that I think we were missing with our pre-recorded training was it allowed me to interact with the audience. So our pre-recorded training was a 30-minute training. And what this workshop was 2 1-hour workshops. But each 2 1-hour workshop actually turned into, each one was about 2 to 3 hours, because I would finish the training and then I stuck around for questions and answers, and we would still have 300-400 people on with us 3 hours later. So we created a much better experience in this runway. And again, it goes to experience. Make it an experience. Make it an event. So our runway last year, the content that influences, they may watch a pre-recorded training for 30 minutes and they may like it, they may not, and then they're off doing whatever they want to go do. Whereas here, I got to spend a total of 6 hours with hundreds of people. 6 hours with hundreds of people before our main sales mechanism. I was able to build a massive amount of rapport, relationship, answer questions. I was able to interact. I wasn't just letting them go through this on their own. I was able to create community. Because what happened after those 2 days is everyone went into our Facebook group and they started talking about questions that I had answered. They started talking about things that I had said, not even in the training, but in the Q&A. They talked about what their breakthroughs were, because I asked them in the training, like, why don't you guys share your breakthroughs? I said, hey, why don't you guys put some of this into action and start posting it and I can review it. So we created a community around this. And it was, I would say to this day, to like looking back at this launch, I would say this, besides redoing the video series, this may have been one of the most impactful things that we did inside of our entire launch. And if you guys remember last week's episode, 122 sales out of our 320 sales all came from this bootcamp. So 30 to 40%, somewhere in there, 30 to 40% of our sales actually came from this bootcamp. And we had about 5,000 people register for it. It didn't cost us a huge amount of money, like maybe, 20, 30 grand or so, which for us, and I understand 20, 30 grand is a lot of money, but in comparative, like comparing it to what we spent altogether, it was maybe 10% of our budget. But it produced a huge amount of sales for us. So let's just put it this way. The percentage of what it took from our budget was not as much as the percentage of overall sales, meaning it may have been 10% of our budget, but it was over 30% of our sales. So it was incredibly, incredibly powerful to have that runway. And I do believe to my core that focusing on experience, community, and doing it live versus a pre-recorded opt-in was a game changer. So Laura, I don't know if you're a fan of the podcast or you listen to the podcast. I'll have to send you a note, but I definitely took, which is funny because working with Laura was awesome and amazing, working on her messaging, but I learned stuff, like helping her with her messaging. I was like, oh, this is cool. I never thought of that, or never really focused on experience that much. And I kind of took that to heart going into this launch for our runway. And it really, really paid off. So number one, the biggest lesson, or one of the biggest lessons, one of the 8 lessons, is having a great runway focused on experience, doing it live, focusing on community, and doing it live so we can build that community, build that rapport, and get questions answered, and really just build that trust with the audience before we move them into the video series. Also, doing it live and having a huge Q&A session allowed me to continue to push and promote the video series. So they would ask a question and I would say, that's a great question. We didn't cover that in the workshop. Let's just stay with the information in the workshop. However, we will talk about it in the video series on March 1st. I just kept pushing March 1st, March 1st, March 1st, March 1st. When they would ask questions, I would say, this is great. I'm going to give you a very surface level answer in our video series. We're going to go deeper into it. I don't want to cover that yet because it's going to be too much and too overwhelming for a lot of people. So we're going to just cover that in the video series on March 1st. So it's always March 1st, March 1st. We built a lot of demand for the video series. Second lesson is I learned the importance of pushing your company. And very simply put, this may not be news to you guys, but if you want new results, then you can't keep doing the same thing. Meaning that if you just did for example, we did a $900,000 launch last year. If I wanted to do a $900,000 launch, look, my team knows how to do a $900,000 launch. They know what their role looks like in a $900,000 launch. They know what they have to do in a $900,000 launch. I know what I have to do in a $900,000 launch. But if I want different results, I have to push the company beyond what we know. I have to push the company and every single employee into the unknown, which might mean the unknown of their role, maybe pushing them into a role they haven't taken before, maybe pushing them beyond the limits of what they think they can do. This focuses on building their self-confidence. This is allowing them to go make the mistakes. This is asking them to work harder during these times, which I did do in one of our team meetings. And I said, this is it, guys. This is what we work for the last 7 months. This is what we've been working for. And we're not going to just give up and play easy and take it easy when we can see the finish line ahead of us. Like, this is the Super Bowl. This is what we've been working for the entire year. And inside the company, we're very flexible. You can take off as much time as you want, do work wherever you want, do whatever, like pretty much do whatever you want. But for these next couple of weeks, I'm asking you to give it your all and more. And I think as a business owner, this is just naturally where we lie. This is just naturally where we live anyways. Like, we're always pushing ourselves, right? Like, we're always focusing on self-development. We're always focusing on bettering ourselves because we know how much of a direct impact that has on our revenue as we focus on our growth. But I think sometimes we forget that the growth needs to go beyond us. If we want to grow our companies and we want to grow, it's not just growing ourselves. It's growing our employees. It's giving them the tools in order to grow. It's giving them the space to grow. It's giving them the fertile grounds that they can grow on. And that was one of the things that I kind of focus on a little bit here, is I really encourage them to go and to grow and to expand and take ownership of their roles, to step into those new roles and leave that ground for mistakes. There were a lot of mistakes made inside of this launch. There were a lot of things that didn't go according to plan. There were a lot of things that were forgotten. There were a lot of things that weren't done to the level of what I would have liked to see them done. But that's growth. That means I'm pushing my company. And the way I viewed this launch is I'm going to push my company. I'm going to push my employees to the point where things actually break. Because when they break, we know what needs to get fixed. We know what needs to get strengthened. And there were systems and there were processes that broke. Like, for example, like you heard in the last episode, our process for sales calls completely broke. Like, massively. I mean, it was a glass cup that got dropped from the top of the Empire State Building and it shattered everywhere. I mean, it was a problem because these are sales calls. These are people that want to buy, and we ran out of spots for calls within the first 24 hours. Then we fixed the problem and then it broke again. And then we fixed it again and then it broke again. In fact, it took so much time from Taylor and me to get it fixed that there were things that we didn't get to do that we wanted to do because we were so focused on the sales call stuff. We broke the company. So you have to be able to push your company if you want new results. And that includes your employees. You have to push your employees and you have to encourage that growth. And look, it's fine if your employees don't want to grow. Here's the way I view it. And I'm starting to make this a little bit more clear to my team. A lot of them already know this anyways, but we have a team meeting coming up in a few weeks where they're definitely going to know it. Where if they want to be a leader within the company, they are going to have to grow. I'm not going to force them to grow because I can't. They have to want to do that on their own. And if they don't want to grow, that's fine, but they're going to stay in the same position that they've always been in. And that's not a leadership role. A leadership role within a company means that you're constantly growing, you're constantly evolving, you're constantly bettering what you do. And a lot of that is self-development and stuff like that. And so I'm going to be pushing my team even more and pushing the company. And I'm doing that with the understanding that that's going to reveal more mistakes. It's going to reveal more flaws. It's going to reveal broken systems. And that's fine because that is growth. So you got to push the company. That's lesson number 2. And we definitely did that. A couple of ways that I pushed myself. Number 1, I spent 2.5 times more than I ever have on a single launch. I spent so much money that if we would have lost it all, it would have really put me in I don't know if it would have put me in a bad spot. It probably would have put me in a bad spot. It would have put me in a very uncomfortable spot for sure. So that's one way in which I pushed myself. Another way that I pushed myself actually leads me to another point that we'll talk about here in a second. Like having complete faith in my team, stepping back. I think out of every launch, this is the one where I was most hands off. And that was a great thing, but it's also one of the things that I've battled with the most. I mean, you can ask any one of my teammates, especially Matt and Taylor, they'll tell you like one of the things that I've really, really had to battle and learn over the last 2 years is how to let go. and not micromanage and let them do their thing. And even if they do their thing and it's something I'm like, I'm not 100% there yet, like trusting in it and doing it anyways. Kind of like the Santa ad that we talked about in the last launch. I think with Matt coming into the company, he's the one that probably really pushed me to get to this level the most. And I really had to get out of the way to let him do his thing. And there's things that he's done where I'm like, dude, I just don't really know about that or like it, but we did it anyways. And we saw amazing results. And that stuff wouldn't have happened had I just not had complete faith. And that's actually number 3. The biggest lesson that I learned on this is having complete faith. Even when I thought I was doing a great job, I looked at ways of how I could do it better. And this was really hard because we spent over $250,000. So I spent the most amount of money I've ever spent in my entire life. We invested 7 months of the team effort into this thing. And then on top of all of that, I let go of complete control. So we spent all the money, we spent all this time, and then I just had to completely trust that the team was going to execute on everything. I try not to inject myself into their process. And that was really, really hard because I spent more time building this thing up, doing the video series, like scripting. I spent the most amount of money that I've ever spent, but I did the less amount inside of this launch than I ever have. And that was an extremely hard thing to do. And again, it was like me putting complete faith in my team. My team did everything. Taylor basically planned and it's a team effort with the planning, but she basically kind of took the reins of planning this thing out, executing on it, running it, managing the team, managing the ad. I mean, everything, managing the ads, managing the team, managing all of the affiliates that we had. Taylor worked her butt off. And there was part of me that was like, I hated seeing her work so much when some days that I would work like 4 or 5 hours. And that was really hard for me to do. But I had to keep telling myself, no, this is where you need to be. It's not, you may have worked 4 hours today, like physically sat down and worked. But what you're doing in the other 4 hours is you're planning what you want to say on your live streams. You're sitting in the silence to figure out what's the angle going to be for the Q&A session that you're going to do. What's your intuition telling you on the direction of the Q&A panel? And those are the invisible things that a lot of people won't focus on. Those are the things that people are like, that's not work, that's blah, blah, blah. But it 100% is the work. And by putting complete faith in my team, it freed me up to focus on those invisible things that most people won't focus on. And that was another hard transition, was really leaning in on those invisible things that I preach, but bring it to a whole nother level in the middle of the launch. But that only happened because I was able to put more things on my team. And then with Matt, with the video series, same thing. It got to a point where I just had to, like when we first went over the video series, I was very unsure about it. It put me into a place of being very uncomfortable because it was completely new. It was just a different experience, and I didn't know what to expect. And when I saw it, it just put me so much out of my comfort zone. It was kind of like, okay, and it happened multiple times. I was like, everything's awful and blah, blah, blah. And poor Matt is sitting right next to me, but poor Matt had to deal with that multiple times. But what's really interesting is I got to see Matt grow from that as well. Like him being able to take my freakouts and adjust and come back strongly and be like, okay, well, what are we going to do? Here's the plan, blah, blah, blah. And figure those things out. And my freakouts weren't affecting him as much as they may have when he first started. But even seeing Matt take control and build out the system and in the process in which our workflows work, our team works, getting all the ads set up. And then same thing with Jackie, and then seeing them come through and put everything together. It was just like, I had no option but to put complete faith in them because I had no idea what the F they were even doing. Like, I just like the screenplays and the frames and like this transition over there and blah, 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 blah. I'm just like, I don't even know how to manage this even if I wanted to. So I was forced to do that. But to see them come through and put all of that together was awesome. And the same thing with like Emily, like one of her responsibilities within the company is to the after the sale, the experience after the sale, and having her start to create the boxes that we send out to people and have them custom made, and we're spending more money there. I think these boxes are going to cost us $25,000 to put together and ship out to our customers, and seeing her do that and get up on the support as well. And same thing with and Emily was answering questions that she's never even answered before. And I was just kind of like, and I could see a lot of the interactions on stuff. But it's just like, let's just see how she answers it. Let's see what happens. She'll learn from this. If it's a mistake, then it's a mistake, and she'll learn from that. Same thing with Brittany. And if they ran into a problem, then I knew they could come and ask me. And same thing with Brittany with the tech. And this one was a little scary too, because our tech had to be completely 100% dialed in, because we had affiliates that were opening up their audience to us, affiliates that were promoting us, affiliates that depended on this revenue coming in from this launch. And the tracking had to be 100% dialed in. We had tracking on multiple platforms. We were tracking in ActiveCampaign and Kajabi, like different forms we were using. And this is the first time that Brittany had ever handled tech to this level. And I worked with her on it, and so did Taylor. But then it got to a point where she's like, I got this. And it took an intense amount of strength and trust for me to not go in and double check the work. And it took a huge amount of trust for me knowing that Taylor can handle that and double check and make sure and all that stuff. So I was completely out of all of that as well. And that was tough. And I really had to live in this idea that if it's a problem, it becomes a problem, then we will address the problem in that moment. But I'm not going to sit here and worry and take myself away from the things I need to focus on, like the silence and planning, to micromanage the team. And it worked out great. So lesson number 3 was having complete faith in my team at a whole nother level. Out of curiosity, Matt, did you notice me doing that in this launch or not really? Like giving more control to you guys, or did it still feel like I was micromanaging from your perspective on a lot of that stuff?
I think there's more control, but when you'd come in, you'd drop a nuke and then you'd leave. You'd be like, okay, what does this mean? So I think it was you pulling away for sure. Like I could sense you
yeah.
Like the old you and the new you kind of like conflicting there, but yeah, for sure.
Okay. So basically what Matt said is the old me and the new me were conflicting. Like I would, if I understood Matt correctly, it was, I would be away for longer periods of time, giving more space. But then when I did come in, it was like dropping a bigger, Matt's words, not mine, a nuke. It was like bigger changes and stuff like that, which I can totally see. But I would say those nukes were like more high level directional things than just micromanaging per se, right? Would you agree with that? Yeah. And that was the thing, is like putting complete faith in the team doesn't mean you kind of like bury your head in the sand and you walk away. You still need to make sure that direction or visional higher view direction is still in place. And I think that's the thing, is like if the team was getting a little bit off direction, I would drop a nuke to move them back into where it felt with alignment with me and what the direction was and the theme and the message. But again, I think this is going to be a dance that we have inside of our company forever. I think anytime any company is growing, there's going to be new employees, new systems, new processes, and it's always going to take a new level of faith from the CEO or you as the visionary, always, because the company's always going to be evolving. Okay, so let's move on to one more point on this. And I think the reason why a lot of people have problems with this is because they focus more on the fear by default. We focus more on like what could go wrong if my team messes up. They don't see it as like a growth standpoint. They don't look at it as a growth lesson. What am I gaining from this? They look at it as what's going to go wrong if my team messes this up, versus looking at the benefit. Right? So what I did during this launch is I very much focused on the benefit. What's the benefit I'm going to get or the company's going to see, giving them complete faith? Number one, the big benefit is they make a mistake, we're going to learn the lesson and they will never make that mistake again, which means our standard within the company goes up. If something, the other benefit is that they do really well and I'm freed up to focus more on the role that I need to focus on. I'm actually less stressed out now because I'm sitting in silence more every single day. I'm able to serve the clients a little bit better, the audience a little bit better. I'm able to think through my lives a little bit better, so they're planned out. I can think through my counterexamples, my metaphors, the stuff that I want to use, my analogies that I want to use. I can think through things a lot better because of it. Now, when we don't focus on the good outcome, when we don't focus on the benefit, we have to remember that the reason why we're focusing on the negative outcome is because of fear. And that's just a default. But the problem is living in that fear is what never leads to success. The business owner that always focuses on the worst outcome, the thing that could go wrong versus what could go right, the optimist versus the pessimist. The pessimist, the person focusing on the negative outcomes all the time, tend to be the ones that micromanage all the time because they're living in the fear of what might go wrong. And the ones that live in the beautifulness of what could go right are generally the more optimistic and the ones that give more space to their team. And that's where I really wanted to live during this launch. Lesson number 4, haters are gonna hate. So one of the things that I didn't really expect, which I don't know why, it kind of makes sense when you think about it, but spending 2.5 times more money on ads and doubling the amount of leads more than doubling the amount of leads you get on launch should mean you're going to get double the amount of haters, right? It makes sense. But for some reason that didn't register in my head, and it was true. In fact, we had one lady, I remember, and my number one advice to anyone who gets haters is just delete and block. Like, if they're really just being a-holes and they're just being mean and delete and block. If it's someone asking a legit question, like, have an open conversation with them. I think it's totally fine. If it's someone who's just like, hey, my perspective on this is blah, 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 X, Y, and Z, and they're not really being haters, that's really fine. Just leave the comment alone or just respond and be like, hey, thanks for your perspective and move on. I think that's great. Great, healthy conversation is fine. But I mean, we had one lady who came on and was telling me all sorts of things. And I remember there's a point to the story, but it became one point in the conversation because it started off as a, hey, here's my perspective on things. And then as I started to respond back to her comments, I started to realize, oh, she's actually a hater. Like, this completely goes against her beliefs of, what we're doing here. And at one point she said something like, well, you have 7,000 fans on Instagram. You don't know what you're talking about. And I was like, well, that's the point. We have a multi-million-dollar business with 7,000 Instagram fans. It's not about the followers. That's the entire point we're trying to make. And I was like, this week alone, we have over 1 million reach because we're running ads. We're going to make money off of it, blah, blah, blah. And she said something along the lines of, my clients off an organic post can get 1 million reach in a week, or it's not impressive. Or I know, something along those lines. And she basically told me something, I don't remember exactly what it was, but something along the lines of, you don't actually do what you're doing. You haven't mastered it yourself, and you're just selling a course on it. But obviously she doesn't listen to the podcast. She doesn't know what we're all about, because we're all about the knowing. She doesn't know that we have an agency. We have clients ourselves. She doesn't know that a lot of the reasons why I know what I know is actually through working with clients, not in our own brand. That's one of the reasons why we transferred to a personal brand this last year, was because we kept focusing on everyone else's business. And I eventually just deleted and blocked because it's obviously not worth my time. Once I found out she's just not really wanting a healthy conversation, I started to realize all the haters are just going to look at what they see. They're going to look at the surface level of what they see through their own lens. And that's exactly what this lady was doing. She clearly hadn't done the research. She didn't know who we were, what we stood for, what we were teaching. She just saw an ad. It conflicted against or with some beliefs that she had. So she just went and started going off. And I started to realize, like, had I recognized earlier she was a hater, I wouldn't have wasted 10 minutes of my life. But what I really realized with haters gonna hate is that responding to the haters takes away from energy that I can give back to the launch. So although it was just 10 minutes, it's 10 minutes that I could have thought about a new angle, a new thought reversal, a new metaphor, a new way that I want to serve people. Or I could have just used it for rest. So I was more rested during the launch. And so what I realized, number one, is that haters are only speaking through their lens and their beliefs, so it doesn't mean anything unless I make it mean something. But number two is when you go bigger and when you spend more money, more haters are going to come out, and we have the option to let it take more of our energy or to not. And I think out of every single launch, the amount of energy that went into haters, even though they were multiplied during this launch, was less than it's ever been on any other launch. The need to want to be right to them was less than any other launch. And one of the reasons why that happened is because I saw the effect this launch was having on my team in a good way, right? The growth was happening, but also I saw the amount of lives that were being changed by people who just even went through our workshop. The amount of perspective shifting that was happening was amazing. The amount of suffering that was ending was amazing. You know, people had these beliefs around content and messaging that were literally keeping them trapped. They were suffering because of it. And just the free workshop was able to free them from it. Most people don't realize this, but messaging is a transformational process. In fact, when people go through the program and they go through the deeper purpose exercise and they finally uncover the deeper purpose, we've had grown men cry when they find it because it's so beautiful. And again, it's combining the masculine and the feminine energies, but that doesn't happen if I get so consumed by the haters. And so the lesson number 4 that I realized, which I kind of already knew, but I actually got to go live it, I got to get the knowing of it, was that I need to spend less energy worrying about the haters or responding to the haters, just delete and block, or responding in a very positive way to people that are just kind of questioning things, and then moving on. And truly moving on, not like letting it sit in my brain for the next 4 hours of what I should say and blah, 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 blah. So that was lesson number 4. Lesson number 5 is very similar theme to what we've been talking about, but it's actually focusing on leadership. So for me, I'm always looking at how to become a better leader. And I would say in the context of business, it's something that I've had to battle with the most. Like when I was a cross-country runner, leadership was very easy. It was like, okay, cool, I'm the fastest one on the team. All I need to do is just motivate people, give it my all, be that example. But with business, it's a little bit differently. Like you still want to do that. Business, it's a little bit differently because what I realized leadership is, like one of the things I've been missing with leadership is really allowing the space for people to grow and trusting in those that if they make a mistake, it doesn't really matter. And you have to know that growth only happens when mistakes are made. I forget who said it, but success is a really crappy teacher because it doesn't really teach you anything new, right? And in order to get new results, we need to do things differently. But the only way we're going to get that growth is by trying things, and we're never going to do it 100% perfect. So there's always going to be mistakes. But a lot of companies and business owners think that mistakes are bad. They think that mistakes literally won't happen. They literally want to grow their company without mistakes happening. It's freaking backwards. It doesn't make any sense. We're never going to find a successful person that saw a level of success and a new level of success and a new level of success doing things 100% perfectly. And for some reason, a lot of people live in this paradigm where they think growth will happen and because things are perfect. And it's the absolute backwards thing, the absolute most backwards thinking you can have, because you will never, ever find an example where that's true, ever. In fact, I was just watching Beyond the Tank, and there was this company, I forgot what it's called. I think it was Bottle Breacher, and it's like this company. They have the empty 50 caliber bullets, and they turn them into like beer bottle openers. And they went on Shark Tank, and Mr. Wonderful invested in the company, and they were so popular, and there's so many orders coming in that they were backlogged, like 20,000 bottle openers or something like that. And again, this is all Beyond the Tank, so after the Shark Tank deal. And their machines were only pushing out 600 a day, and they're getting like 2,000 orders a day. So they're constantly getting farther and farther and farther behind. So they saw growth, right? They saw the success in sales that they wanted, but they now had a mistake and a broken system within their business. And Mr. Wonderful basically went in and said, you guys need to fix this. And he gave them the space to go figure it out. He gave them guidance, and one of his team members came in and was like looking at their process and helped them out. And then they had to go figure it out. And then within 2 months, they refined their process using some of the advice they got from Mr. Wonderful and his team member. And they went and they figured it out. He gave them the space to do it. He's not micromanaging them. He gave them the space to go do it. And within 1 month, they had caught up on their entire back order by changing the process. Now, most people are so afraid of making mistakes, of doing things incorrectly, that they never realize that that is a necessary part of growth. Much like Bottle Breacher went in and just saw a flood of sales and were getting angry customers and tweets, they didn't just give up. They looked at it as an opportunity to grow. And because of that mistake, because of having the mistake of taking on too many orders and not having the fulfillment, because of that mistake, they completely rehauled their system and they can now take 2,000 to 3,000 orders a day. Mr. Wonderful gave them the space to grow. They figured it out themselves. They grew and they came out to a much better place and are now much more successful because now they can scale into more products, into more lines. And now they're doing things beyond just beer bottles. They're doing wine openers and all of this stuff. But all of that happened because the mistakes happened. And also Mr. Wonderful, being that leader, gave them the space to figure it out. And so for me, the leadership role that I kind of took on this time was trying to give them, my team, more space in order to grow and in order to develop more things within their company. And ironically, it's one of the things that needs to happen in order to grow that I wasn't doing. So what I mean by that is I would tell my team, you guys need to grow, you need to evolve your role, right? And then I would micromanage. So it's like, how do I want them? If I'm going to micromanage them, maybe I should just evolve the role for them. But I realized I need to give them more space in order to grow so that they can have the space to evolve the role. So it's almost two contradictory things happening before the launch, which was like, evolve your role, take ownership. Okay, I'm also going to micromanage. And that kind of went away this launch. And I think for here on out, it'll continue to go away more and more. So that was lesson number 5. Lesson number 6, maintaining my own energy and exposure was incredibly important. Because here's the thing. If I want my team to grow, I want my students to grow as well. They don't want a leader, or they can't have a leader that's freaking out. That's like, oh my God, things are going awful. What if I lose all my money and da-da-da-da-da. And yeah, there was a couple moments where I kind of expressed like, wow, this is a lot of money. And like, I hope it goes well in a joking manner. But really, if you're going to be that leader inside your company, that starts with you maintaining your composure and your energy. And my team needed it, because if they're making mistakes, the worst thing I can do is come down on them in the middle of a launch and make them feel bad for making those mistakes, instead of having them look for the lessons, instead of making them realize, hey, it's okay, that'll never happen again. Let's adjust and fix and move on from that. Freaking out, basically, if you're going to freak out during a launch and all that stuff, it comes from an illusion of how things should be. You have this idea of here's what things should look like, here's what the launch should look like, here's what my team's role should look like. And then when it doesn't hit that illusion that you created in your head, you start to freak out. But if we can get rid of those illusions and just know we're aiming for growth, we're aiming for progress, I just want you to do better than you did the day before. I want you to learn. If you make a mistake, learn it. Don't make that mistake again, because the way I look at it, the way I explain it to my team is failure is fine. Like failure, if you want to try something and you're going to go for it and you're going to do something new and you fail and it doesn't work out the way, that's fine. But when it's repeated failures of the same thing, that's when things to me get classified as mistakes. So failing is okay. Mistakes, one or two mistakes is fine because we can learn from it. But I had looked at what I needed to focus on and inside the company. And I just realized you need to focus on being cool. Maintaining your energy, maintaining your frequency, maintaining your vibration, and maintain on your zone of genius, which is teaching messaging on levels that people haven't heard before, ending that suffering. And so I really took a great effort in maintaining my energy and just realizing no matter what happened, I'm going to be okay. Things will always be fine. And we did well. Everything did fine. So had I freaked out during the middle of launch, it would have been for nothing because everything ended up working out okay. Number 7 is more of a tactical lesson. And this is the upsell downsell. We kind of went over this on the last podcast episode, so I'm not going to get into the nitty gritty of this one. But basically, 10%, I believe around 10%, I might be off a little bit, but around 10% of our revenue from this launch came in because we offered an upsell and we offered a downsell And then we offered an upsell off of that downsell. So people that didn't buy the main program, we gave them a little like introductory course that they can go through until we open up enrollment again. Then when they bought that course, we upsold them into the main course that they said no to a week before. And 20% of those people said yes to that. So we had about 100 sales on the small offer and 19 of them moved up into the higher level. So number 7, upsells and downsells are absolutely vital and important. And number 8, again, this is kind of the same theme that we've been hearing this entire time. But look at every launch as an opportunity to grow, or a better way to phrase this is look at this every launch as an opportunity to move your standard within your company to a higher level. And I think that's what was really something that I've been missing for a really long time, was that every time you go bigger inside of a launch, you're not just going bigger and making more money and whatever, bringing on more students and customers. You're setting a new standard within your company. So what I realize is going to be happening is that when I go and I look at lesson number 2, I believe it was, push your company. So I'm pushing my company to a level where things are going to start breaking. We fix those things. But now that they're fixed, that's the new standard inside of my company. Doing a $1.5 million launch is a new standard inside of my company. When I look back at a year from now, when we did 900,000, if we were to do another affiliate launch and hit 900,000, I would look at that as like, okay, we did something wrong. What did we mess up? Because our new standard, we just did 1.5. Our systems are better. Our processes are better. Our team's better. Our team's more strategic. Our following's bigger. Where did we go wrong? Because 900,000 was our standard heading into this launch. Now our standard is 1.5 million. And I don't say standard in the terms of revenue per se. I'm looking at standard as company strength, employee strengths, and operation strengths. Our standard of what our employees can do, what their roles are, what their skills are, it all just evolved to something higher. We completely evolved into a new standard within our company. Again, growth needs to happen so that you have the ground and the education. So you need to provide those grounds and education for that as well. And what I mean by that is, yes, I'm telling my team to grow, but I'm not just saying, hey, go figure it out and grow. Like Brittany, for example, she grew into a massive role within the company when she started taking over all of our pages, landing pages, opt-in pages. She was designing them. She was handling the tech, making sure it was all integrated and all of that stuff. I didn't just say, hey, here you go. We got on Zoom calls and I did Zoom calls with her and Taylor did as well. And so here's how it goes. Here's the training video. Here's this, here's that. And then once the training is done, give her the space to go do it and allow her to come to us. Where am I getting stuck? Can you guys double check this real quick? Or I have a question on this type of thing, right? But now that she's gone through that process, she's seen growth, and that growth at the level that she's at now is the new standard. And she will grow and evolve from that place as well. And so the lesson number 8 was that every launch is not just an opportunity to make more money. It's an opportunity to set a new standard within your company. And I don't know why, but I never saw that before, was that we were just, if we do it right, we're evolving to a new standard, and that new standard becomes our norm, and that will allow us to grow and grow and grow and grow, both from mindset-wise, operations, systems and process-wise, employee-wise, and all around. So those are the 8 lessons. Let me just give them to you real quick, and then we'll wrap up this episode. Number 1, create an amazing runway that's focused on experience. Number 2, push your company to the level where it's going to break, and that will be okay because that's going to provide growth. Have complete faith in your team and let go more and more and more, so you give yourself the space that you need to be in the place that you need to be in. Haters are going to hate, especially when you grow. They're going to be more intense. It's your choice whether you give them the energy or not. And when you typically don't give them the energy, they just happen to go away. Number 5 is focused more on leadership this time around than anything else. I focus less on strategy and micromanaging than I have ever, and focus more on leadership. Number 6, maintain my energy and composure to be pretty even-keeled, positive, and optimistic. during the entire launch. Number 7, having an upsell and downsell place in order, because that resulted in about 10% of our revenue. And then number 8, look at every launch, not just as something that's going to bring in revenue, but something that's going to quickly evolve the standards within my company and to facilitate the evolvement, or not evolvement, but evolvement of those standards within the company. So with that said, what I would love for you guys to do is tell me what your favorite breakthrough was inside our new Facebook group called the New Generation Entrepreneur Podcast. It's on Facebook. We do behind the scenes episodes. Sometimes we live stream some of the episodes before we go live. We do some Q&As and different things like that inside that Facebook group. And we're building a community around the podcast there. So I'd love to hear from you. Head over to Facebook, go to the New Generation Entrepreneur Podcast, and I'll see you guys on the next episode. Hey guys, thank you so much for checking out another episode of the New Generation Entrepreneur Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, go below, hit the subscribe button, and make sure you click on that bell icon and get notified every time we drop a new episode. Now, if you're looking for the show notes, we have them linked underneath this video, as well as our social media handles and some links to free training and offers that we drop from time to time to help you guys even further. So go check those out if you're interested, and thank you so much for tuning in to the New Generation Entrepreneur Podcast.